Hi, everyone. It's Liesl from Artist Palette, and I have all my supplies here out in the open, which I'll go over all my supplies. So just remember, you can pause the video. You can also watch this later. And it's nice to see where people are tuning in from. You can type where you are. Hi, guys. So we are doing this painting today, the lamppost, which is supposed to be a sort of take on the Narnia lamppost. And we're going to do various trees, lots of leaves, make it look a bit like a forest. So this is a paper plate that I'm reusing. This is all dry, but I do have my bright red here, phthalo blue, bright yellow, and black and white. So this red is actually, even though it says bright red, it's not the orange kind. So you have to keep that in mind. I'm not using the orange kind. It's more closer to a crimson red, if anything. You can also have a premixed purple, like a violet. You can use a violet instead if you're having issues with your red. Hi, Sarah and Lynn. I see a lot of familiar names. Okay, and now for the supplies that I'm using aside from the paint, this is my 12 by 16 canvas, which you can use, of course, any size. I have a large brush that is more of a kind of like a mop brush, but don't worry, you don't need to have a mop brush. It's just a large, flat or round is good. I like to fill in my background, which is, as you can see, is this light teal here. For a little bit of leaves later on, some frosty white bits. And I have a flat medium brush. So this is about a size 4. And then I have a couple of detailed brushes. I find that a size 0 is best for working on the lamppost. You can get tiny little lines, or you can also use a size 2 as well. And then I have a pencil here because I feel like we should be drawing out our lamppost first, just so that you have it exactly how you want it. You can press hard with your pencil. And optional, you can have a ruler if you want to use a ruler, of course, to get a perfectly straight line, because it's easy to make things look lopsided, right? So I think we should get started. Someone's asking if they can use crimson red. Yes, you can use crimson red. I'm going to start with my pencil and ruler. When I first made this, I did not use a pencil or ruler. I just kind of winged it. So don't worry, you don't have to have a pencil and a ruler to draw it out. You can actually just draw it out after you paint your entire background. You can just paint it right on. However, I am painting a little bit on an angle, and I don't want it to be lopsided. I'll let you know how tall I went so that you can make this a statement. So it's about 10 inches, and in centimeters, we have 25 centimeters, just in case you want to know exactly. So let's place this a little bit, not in the center. It might look a little bit like it's towards the side. It is off to the side slightly, but from the center, it's just a little bit more to my left. So I have room for some trees here. I have some snowy trees and everything. So I just want to put a line. Try to make this pretty straight. Just press a little bit lighter for reference. Then you can press harder when you have things how you want it. So I tried to look at a picture of the lamppost in the books. I think this is similar to that. I feel like someone's going to correct me, but there's so many interpretations of it. Okay, so at the top, I just want to draw it out what I think looks nice, and you can always change things up. I like to start with a little bit of the kind of swoopy triangle. It's swerving out, scooping out just a little bit. You know what I realized? I went a little bit too far to the left. I was just giving you guys an explanation not to go too much to the side. I actually wanted a little bit more in towards the middle. Not even taking my own advice. Yeah, so I feel like this is a good spot. Okay, so when you have your line here, then I have a little circle at the top and then a swoopy triangle coming out. Okay, and this is more of the cap at the top, kind of like a hat. And I'm going to just put a line going down. You can always make this taller too. That's always easy to do, but I think I went pretty tall. I wouldn't use a pen. I'm just afraid that the ink will just smudge and smear all over your canvas when you start painting with water. And then from here, you're going to take right to the corner. You're going to bring it down just a bit. Try to keep it around the same angle, not touching the middle line, but then you're going to bring it across. The tiny other little details we're going to do afterwards. This makes our life a lot easier. And as you can see in the lamppost, I have some interesting lines. We have the middle line, that's very important. From the side on the corner, I'm just going to bring that in and swoop that in for the other side too. Just a few centimeters from there. And then from here, I'm just going to make kind of like a little soft bump at the top and a line at the bottom. Right here, right where the bottom of this triangle, the point meets. And then down here, you can add little designs onto it, make it more unique lamppost instead of just plain, but you know, plain is good too. I just did a couple little soft triangles. Bring this down, and towards the bottom, we're going to make that, call it a bit of a dress. So I have the bottom of the lamp. I'm doing a little bump, bring that down, just on each side. Kind of, it looks like a bullet. There we go. Looks like a bullet. From the bottom, swoop it up. And I did a couple of rings just above here. A couple little swoops. They look like smiley faces. And then just curve the sides right on the edge. So 2 swoops over, just right in the middle, curve it, and then just bring it down. This is going to be much thicker when we start filling this in. It's going to be wrapped around that hole there. All right, and I think we can start our background. I'm going to be painting over this, but I'm still going to see my pencil marks, which is great. That's why I wanted you to press hard once you have everything that you need to have, that you're happy with. And if you wanted, you could always make this line a little bit thicker on each side, so it's not just a flimsy stick, so it doesn't blow over. Okay, who's ready to start the background? I am using my large brush. Okay. So I'm just taking a little dip in my water, just squeezing out the extra water. I just want it a little bit wet. And then for our color, let's pull some blue to the side. And we're only going to take, to start, just a little bit of yellow. You can see very little. Mix that. It's going to be very dark to start until we take scoops of white. And then you can decide how greenish teal you want it to look. So you only want to add little increments of dots of yellow. Otherwise, you can see it starts turning green pretty fast. So the blue is going to, if you add more blue, it's going to make it more, of course, blue again, but then you have to add more white. So I feel like this is pretty much the color that I'm going for. Yes. Just adding a little bit more white here. Perfect. So if you have something like this, all I'm going to do is, let's start in the middle, let's test it out. You can take another little dip of your water. And I'm just going up and down. Nice, generous amount of paint on the brush. A little bit of water, pick up some more. And I am going over this lamppost. I can still see it. So as you can see, I'm mostly getting the top here. I'm also going to get to the bottom. However, at the bottom, I'm going to change directions because I find that it makes it easier to just be able to tell where the ground is. And I think roughly around here is good. So that's, for me, I think about a third of your canvas from the bottom up. It's a little bit more than a quarter, I think. And fill that in side to side. Nice long strokes here. And finish the top. So it's pretty easy, just filling in the background one solid color. We're only going to get darker from here. Mixing a little bit more. Take a dip of my water. I like to get all the little white spots, and then you can finish up with that line going horizontally across because it makes it easy to see where that forest is going to start. And a little tip, if you're trying to make the middle a bit brighter, you're finding, oh, it's not that bright, it's not that light, just take white paint and start in the middle and then just drag it outwards on each side to get it a little bit lighter overall. Okay. So I'm washing off this brush really well. And I won't be using it for a while because I'm just going to let that dry just for a couple minutes. You can kind of wave it around. You can get a blow dryer. I'm squeezing out the extra water. And the next step would be, in I would say just another 2 minutes, is to get in these background trees. They're just mostly a darker teal, and we're going to get darker. Some of them are more of like a kind of a hint of a purpley grayish looking ones. They're just getting dark. So let me know if you filled in your background. And the next brush would be this medium flat brush. I like to use this one. You can also use any detailed brush. I find the number 2 is good as well. So a little bit of these two mixing back and forth. I would use, start with this one and then switch to this one wherever you need to. Try not to force too many of your trees and branches to be with this brush. Sometimes you can get a thicker line if you go off to the side as you turn it. So I like to use both. This is why I have a really big brush for filling in the background. It might not look like it's that big, but it actually holds a lot of paint. So it gets it done pretty fast. Yeah, so, yeah, if your lamp is now gone, so it really depends on what paint you're working with. If you have really heavy body paint, sometimes it can just paint right over that lamp. You can always do it again, just draw over it, but you can't really do it while it's wet. And someone's asking if you are done, should you dry it? I would say, yeah, try to dry it as fast as you can, just so that you're not waiting around too long. But I'm just about to start with, let's start with the flat one. I'm going to show you how to mix a bit of a darker teal. It's actually pretty easy. It's just adding more blue and a touch of yellow without adding any more white. It gets a bit darker. So more blue into this same section. Maybe not that much blue. Touch of yellow. And if you went a little bit too much, you're going, oh, that's a bit too dark. It's okay to add a tiny bit more white, but nothing like what it was before. So it's a couple shades darker, and you can always test it out too. It's so easy to go over it and change the color a little bit. So once I have a darker version of this, I'm going to wipe off some of this paint because it collects a little bit too much. A little bit of water, just a little touch, just to keep the brush a little bit more flat. I'm going to see how it looks against my background. So a little bit off into the middle, around where I put, so this line here, for example, it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. In fact, I like to make it a little bit more bumpy, a little bit on an angle maybe, coming down. So you're trying to pave a little bit of a walkway into the forest. So it does look, I like the color. It stands out. It's not too dark. It's not too light. And then I'm just going to make a couple little sticks here, just barely touching with the tip of the brush, a little bit wobbly because it's not supposed to be perfectly straight. And I'm going to leave a little gap open. You can see I left a little gap open here. I'm going to carry it along here, just a bit bumpy. All right, I'm done with this brush. I'm over it. I want to do other things with my detailed brush. I can do a lot of things at once, like putting in branches at the same time. So pressing very light, just kind of flicking it out with different angles. And I just let my wrist do a lot of the work. So I'm starting off pretty small, like almost like twigs towards the beginning pathway. It's very light with the tip of it. Someone's asking how you can fix if you put too much yellow by accident. You just have to wash off the brush and just take a little bit of a light blue. It will kind of drain, it will just get rid of all that yellow. It dilutes it quite a bit. Okay, a little bit more water, grabbing more of my slightly darker teal. Notice how my branches are not completely perfect. You can actually use your finger to make it a bit more blurry, kind of wipe off some of the paint just around there. So it looks like it's a bit more faded. I like that. And also another little secret about, it's like a tip, almost not really a secret, but if you're looking to make your forest look more like a forest, making trees all the way on the edges here, no one's going to see. If you want to make a couple of lines at the bottom representing some tree trunks in the distance, you can do that. It creates the illusion that there's more going on than what's really going on, what you've painted. We start with a stick here, make a couple branches, and it fills up quite a bit pretty fast. A couple of these tree trunks. I like to bend mine a little bit. They're not perfectly straight. Kind of reminds me of seaweed, but we're trying not to make seaweed. Okay, so I'm going to keep going in. See, my lamppost is here, but I'm trying not to let that bother me. Just put, you know, what you can. And I'm going to get a little bit taller as I get towards the edge. Press a little bit harder at the bottom. You can get more of a tree trunk into the bottom, and it makes everything else look a little bit thinner when you're doing some branches. I like to use my wrist to just kind of let things go. And they don't all have to be all consistent and everything. Sometimes there's breaks in it, but that's okay because they're in the distance and they're not that noticeable. Okay, quite honestly, I feel like this is a good start. This is pretty good. If anything, you can get a couple more branches on some of your taller trees here just to get some fill, right? Just in case. But you can always come back to this color. It's pretty awesome. You can come back and fill anything that's empty or seems too empty to you later on. Okay. So this little pathway that's coming from the forest, I'm just going to use a little bit extra of this paint that I had on my brush. And I'm going to make it just kind of swerve, and you can do some, you can make it look like it's bending around a corner or something like that. Just by bringing it up a little bit higher and just curving it over to the side somewhere, maybe even longer. You can go a little bit longer, put more work into it. And it's going to be pretty thin towards the back. You want to make it look like it's kind of disappearing, it's fading. So very little paint on the brush. Just kind of wipe off some of the extra paint if it's too much, and just kind of scribble it in so that you're putting a little bit of a shadow on each side, and just turn it off to any side. It can be this side or just one over to the right side is nice so that you're not impeding onto your lamp post. But yeah, that's an idea. Eraser bit. As soon as you start using pencil and you erase anything, they're everywhere. Okay, who's ready for the next layer of trees? And this is going to take off pretty fast. We're going to start getting a lot more interesting after we're finished the next step with the next layer of trees. And there's only really, like, as you can see, one dark purple one that I've done. Then there's these two, but you don't see any other dark purple, which is nice. You're not doing too much, just enough. Okay, so let's start our next step. Now we can use this flat brush You can justify using a little bit more. It's going to get a little bit bigger, and we're going to change the color again. Okay, so into this tealish color, one thing that you can add into it, you can either add in a bit of black or you can add in a touch of purple, which makes it still a bit more grayish. This is up to you. I'm going to add in a little bit of blue and red, a bit of purple here. So it's about equal parts of blue and red, maybe an extra little dip of red if it's still too blue for your liking. Not too much. You don't need a whole ton of red. If you put too much red, it actually is going to start turning a bit brown. Not that that's bad, just not the color scheme that I was really sticking with. So this is quite dark. You can always add a touch of white to it, not yellow. Touch of white to it to get it a little bit brighter again, so it's not going too dark too fast, right? We're saving more of the dark, deep purple for the leaves in the foreground, shadowing. So I have something a little bit darker here. And surprisingly, this purple sits right on top of this teal just nicely. It's just more of a diluted, softer looking purple tone. Violet looking, not quite as red. Okay, so again, I'm just going to wipe off a little bit of this paint with a little bit of water. It's going to keep it flat. So let's start placing, start over here. I have a tree just starting off to the side. And these are going quite tall. So I'm trying to reach more towards the top, or at least close to the top. You don't have to touch the top, but pretty close to it. Doing things with a little bit more purpose now. Press a little bit harder at the bottom. So if I just go over the bottom a little bit, there we go. It keeps it more tree-like. It's not too flimsy. So let's start with another tree. Press and just kind of flick it upwards. Still has some bend to it, just a little bit. You have to keep grabbing more paint and a little touch of water so it keeps that paint very smooth and consistent. And let's just branch off. So just turn it off to the side. And when you're branching off, you can press a little bit harder and then keep it thinner on the ends. It makes it look like with the tree, it starts off a little bit thicker and then it thins out towards the end of it. It makes it look like there's more of a connection from the tree trunk down here, and it just flows and gets a little bit thinner as it pulls away up and out. So again, press from within the tree and just follow it out and then lift your brush and pull it away. Yes, the great thing is you can watch this video anytime and pause it too. So for those who are just tuning in, you can watch it later on. You can watch it now and just tackle it whenever you want to. All right, so I'm going to do, okay, you can see there's only like 1, 2, and then 3 trees that I have going. So I'm going to do another one here. And just branch out, press from with the tree and just up and outwards, pull away, pull off from your canvas to make it thinner. And add as many branches as you want, whatever you feel is necessary. I'm going to add a little bit at the bottom here. Press harder at the bottom. And yeah, these ones are still from the same horizon line. So these ones right here. The ones that are closer towards the bottom, as you can see, are this dark purple one. You can always add more too, and these two trees here. Okay, so I'm washing off this brush. One thing you can do with these purple trees is put just a little bit of some gray over top. So a little bit of black and white. If you want to give them more of a misty look, they're not too noticeable. So a little bit of black and white mixed together. And you can just go over this. Not too much paint on the brush. You can just go over this and give it more of a gray tone. I think it helps give it more of a faded look. Not too much attention is drawn to it. It's not too purple. But don't do this if you really like your color. If you kind of like the way your color looks and you don't want to disturb it, just leave it alone. Yeah, the grayish tone is pretty soft. When I first made this, I did start with purple and then I put gray over top because I felt like the purple was a bit too much in my face and I wanted to tone it down. So this is what I did. Okay, I'll wash this off. And now that I know that this is pretty dry, we're going to just focus on a couple of, just make it more interesting down here. Bits of snow banks, you know, some little clumps of snow and stuff, and some darker shadowed bits, and into the forest too. So you can take your time with this medium flat brush again. When you put some white into here, you can always go back and just touch up on any of your trees here. You can always add more branches. This is where you can decide if you want to put a bit more busyness into the center, even though the leaves are going to make it more busy, but you want to see, you know, if you want to put a little bit more towards the center, or maybe it's too empty. So you can always do that. So I'm going to take just a very light coating of white. Just pulling white to the side with a little touch of water. And you can see it's nice, lightly coated, wiping off a little bit of extra paint. You can use more of the paint that you can get a little bit more of the paint off just by pressing along this line here and then kind of scribbling back and forth straight lines to highlight this little pathway. Okay, so you can add a couple more streaks in there. And I'm just going to let that dry before I touch up the trees with any lighter teal. I'm going to use my white to put clumps of snow in. I'm going to make a little bank right here because I know there's going to be a tree that's just roughly around here, dirt tree. Couple little streaks. Sometimes I like to just dab it in. I like to press and just kind of swipe it to the side. It makes it look like packing snow a little bit more. And when you get a little bit less of your white, I like to just from this pile, just kind of lightly, you can take a little touch of water. It gives it more of a transparent look. And it looks like it's kind of fading. You can see that teal still underneath. Just all over the place. It's almost like you're glazing over the top with a little bit of water and very little bits of white to give it a transparent, highlighted look on top. This is the taking a bit more white technique and just kind of flicking it and dabbing it to give it more of a packing snow look. So there's so many things you can do to give, I don't know, more of the look that you want to. You can make it, when you put more, you can see less of your teal. When you put more water and less white, you can still see that teal through it, and it makes it still look very wintry and very frosty. I like to touch up on this later on too. This is just a starter for what I'm going to do later because we're going to be putting purple, dark purple, and of course some of that yellow from the reflection. Good amount of clumps to start. So I'm just going back to some of that bit of lighter teal here. And it's not the background teal, but it's closer to what we were just using for these trees. So you can just touch up a little bit on those trees back there or add more of them. A couple little touch-ups here. And any more branches. I have a couple branches here that I can always add in to fill some space. Okay. Now I'm seeing who is ready to start some dark purple. So this is our violet color. We're going to be putting in our tree on the side. We're also going to keep that purple for the leaves later on too. You can always mix it again, but if you want to keep it on the side so that you don't have to mix it again, that'd be great. We're going to put it into the bottom here to give some accents of shadow. Enhance anything we need to enhance. Then we'll work on the teal, bits of the teal leaves actually, before we work on these trees. All right. Let's start with our darker violet purple. Back to my medium brush. Let's pull some blue to the side and some red. I'm going to take about equal parts to start and maybe just one extra little scoop of red. It really depends on how purple you want to go, but it's going to make it look violet. This is really dark. I'm going to add in a little touch of white. It's going to make it look a lot more purpley. And wiping off some extra paint so it's not too heavily coated and blotchy when I start painting. Okay, so I kept it a bit more flattened down. Let's plot this tree about 2 inches or about 1.5 inches from the side. So right around here. I'm going to put that in and press a little bit harder because this is more closer to us. This is a bigger tree. A little bit, pretty much to the top. So press a little bit lighter up there and then press a lot harder towards the bottom. So it's coming from that snowbank. They can always add a snowbank. And then I'm going to have another branch come out. So pressing from within the tree, going outwards from here. You can switch to a detailed brush for this step if it makes you more comfortable. Yeah, I'm going to switch to a detailed brush. Because then I can do more twigs coming out from the side. And you can build off of some of these branches. Take more of your time doing this. Fill up the space at the top with a bigger tree filling up the space. And I'm just going to wash this off now. Switch back to my medium brush. Somebody's asking if you should, okay, how to mix purple. Equal parts blue and red, and a little extra red if you want more purple, less bluish looking, less indigo looking. So that's completely up to you, but about equal parts with a little extra dip of red. Someone's asking if you should be using acrylics from the bottle or tube. Honestly, both are great. I use it from the bottle because I have 2-liter bottles. Okay, so back to this flat brush. Let's take our violet, almost indigo, or whatever purple you mixed. Starting from the sides, so towards the bottom, I'm just going to do some shorter lines here. This is more of an impressionist style. So I'm going to kind of see where my lamppost is. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit more when I start painting it in, but I'm starting to get a bit of a shadow going. See, I'm just doing straight lines, streaking it across, very short, and just bringing it down on this angle here to cast more of a shadow into this darker corner. So it's like it's darker as you're sitting into where all these leaves are. And of course, there's going to be a bunch of coats that would be casting more of a shadow and into the darkness here. Just filling up a lot of space. I like to keep it a little bit more separated when you do shorter lines and leave some gaps. It's kind of nice. It gives it more shadow towards the back and over on this side too. Just very little into the center where the light is more in here. So I want to keep it a bit more brighter and open, but still getting some into the back and bottom. Even a little outline around this patch of snow. So you can do little accents of these along the back. Give it a bit more accent. Just helps enhance the whole painting. Okay, and are we ready for some teal leaves, darker teal leaves? They're very much kind of like these teal trees that we just made, about the same color. And hopefully it's going well with the painting so far. We're going to be putting the leaves. It's going to change a lot of how it looks. So in terms of brushes for this part, I still like to use my medium. If you prefer a round brush, you can use that. You can switch between, see which one you like best. You can try both out. Let's start with this one and see how we feel about it. So remember that teal color we made for the trees back here. Much more blue, little dots of yellow until you're happy with your teal color. It doesn't have to match your trees. It can be slightly different. It's totally fine. Not a big deal. It's going to look interesting if you have some different shades and hues of your teal. So I feel like it's something like this. Let's start off a little bit lighter, and you can always go darker when you're more confident with what you're doing, especially towards the middle where it's not supposed to be as noticeable. Let's start a bit on the side. So you'll see as I press and kind of use more of the side, I'm going to press and use more of the side. It gets a nice leafy look. And then I'm going to start overlapping a lot. So less and towards the middle. See, I'm just kind of lightly pressing and not really doing too much in towards the middle. But I'm following a lot of where my trees are and the ends of some of my branches. So you don't see too much of the ends of your branches, and you can get rid of anything awkward. So thicker lines that you're not a fan of, stuff like that. When you use a little bit more white with your paint too, I actually have a trick on making it lighter in the center if you're trying to, but when it's more dry, it comes off a bit more faint and more into the background, like it's not too much in focus. And just a couple in towards the bottom and middle here, not a whole ton. It's always easy to add more than it is to take away. I'm just going right over top of my trees, so don't worry. Not just on the ends, just all over. It's going to engulf the whole area. So we're going to get really heavy-handed over here and over here. Just mixing a little bit more of my teal. So a lot more on top of each other that you're just going over and over towards the sides. Deborah, you're funny. Yes, we did make a color wheel. That's pretty awesome. Lots and lots overlapped over here. On the very sides, you'll see that it is going to get more purple. So if you're kind of a lazy painter, that's okay. You don't have to get all the way to the very edge. You can save a lot of the sides for your indigo purple, whatever purple that you are mixing and you want to incorporate into this painting. So I'm just filling up a lot here as much as I can, but you don't have to go too crazy if you know that your purple is going to use up a lot of the space. So a little bit of water, picking up more paint. And a little bit less towards the bottom, just because I can always add more later on too. And don't forget the very top for some spots. You don't want to cheap out on getting the top because then it looks like you just cut off and the trees suddenly end. You want to make it look like there's life beyond your canvas. So we're going to give it a nice vignette look with some purple indigo going to the top and around the edges. But I am doing that after I do these trees here. These are supposed to be in the very foreground, so they're supposed to be more of the engulfing leaves around everything in the forest. So let's make some green trees now. We're still sticking with our color scheme of in the green and purple family. We're not really straying from that until we get to the lamppost. So I washed off this brush. And someone's asking if the tree needs the same shadow as the lamppost. Yeah, you can put the same shadow in here too. You can cast the shadow on the same angle as this lamppost all the way back. However, since there is a light here, there's a lot of light in this painting coming from many angles, but this one, the light can cast it the other way too. So it really depends, but this light would be maybe casting it more that way. Still with this medium brush, after I washed it off, we're going to make some of this green, and we have to let the green dry before we put white snow on top. So to make our green, it's actually very similar to how we've been making teal, except you're going to take equal parts yellow and blue now. You can just mix right over top wherever you need to, equal parts yellow and blue. If you take a little extra blue, you'll get a tiny bit more on that teal side again. So I'm taking a little bit more, and I'm sticking with the theme that I have going. I'm not going ultra line yellowy green. I'm going a hint more of my evergreen, almost teal color. So again, this is my bright brush. Someone's asking. It's a bright, about number 4 or a ½ inch. Just a flat brush here. Little dip of my water, and I'm just kind of pressing down again on my paint so that it stays pretty thin and I have better control on what's going to happen. So let's place our trees. Off to the side of my lamppost, I know that it's going to be right around here. I can still see it. And I'm not going to just start next to it. I want to go a little bit more, a few inches away. So let's go right around here. Yes. And bring it pretty straight down, straight as you can get it, just a little bit lower down than that horizon that you had here. Okay, so there's that line. And then you can make off to the side, you can either make another little one that's kind of sitting in here, or it's just going to stick about half in, half out, a little bit lower. And just bring that up over here. Okay, how do we make trees here? I'm going to grab a extra plate so I can show you, and then I'll do it again on my canvas. So what you want to do when you have your line, you can switch to a detailed brush, but I like to use the corner of this brush and just lightly tap at the top, light little taps. And then just go down the middle. You can go right across, same side. Just press a little bit harder using more the tip of your brush, and it starts forming a tree already just like that. So very lightly at the top using the corner of your brush. Start pressing a little bit harder as you get a bit further down. Start using straight on to really get into the middle here. And it's going to look like a pretty skinny, pathetic tree until we build onto it. So I'm going to build onto just a little bit lower down. I'm not really touching this up here anymore. I'm going to leave it as is. All I'm going to do is just kind of angle it down a little bit, leave a couple gaps, and just get a little bit longer. So angle it down a little bit, leave some gaps as you get down, and extend what looks like branches as you get to the bottom. Just going to extend some of these. You're just pressing. That's pretty much what I did for these trees. So as wide as you want to go, the wider you go, of course, it's going to look like a nice solid evergreen. But start off a little bit thinner. So let's do this again. Light little touches with the corner at the top. Pressing a little bit harder as I get down the middle. Now, one other thing about this green. You can change your green to you can make it a little bit darker by adding a touch of black to your green paint. If you're finding that it's not covering your background very well, it's a great shadow, and it makes it look more earthy in tone as well. So you can make it a little bit darker. So if you add couple dips or something like that, you can get a deep green, and it will cover your background really well. Little touches up here, and then start extending on an angle downwards. I like to go down, but you can keep it straight too. Get a little bit longer towards the bottom. So you can see in my original, it actually does touch the side of my lamp post at the bottom. It's behind it, so it's ending behind where this is going to end. Mine's going to end lower down on my lamp post, so the tree is technically behind the lamp post. Just making a little bit more green. So you can see the middle is very filled in. There's not much gaps in the middle, except on the edges where you're leaving some gaps on purpose. You're leaving some spacing in between your branches as you pull it out just a little bit more from each side. And just know when to stop as well. Light little touches on the ends make it look a bit more leafy and spaced out. Okay, I'm gonna leave that alone. I feel like that's good enough. Yeah, that's good. And then I'm gonna do this tree that's about half in, half out. Really easy too, because when you start doing the stuff up here, a lot of it's covered by purple leaves. And all you have to worry about is the one side. So you're just going down that middle again and just dragging out by tapping and bringing out some of the branches on this only on this side. So I am dragging it over top of the other tree because this one's in front of this one. So I'm going to go right over top and pretend, like it's going to lay here, it's going to be there, and those branches are sitting over top. Don't work around trees. So how did that go for everyone, making these trees? Oh, Angie, I'm sure you're doing just fine. Sometimes you have to take a step back, look at your painting, see if there's anything you want to adjust. I do it all the time when I'm making paintings. They don't just happen by accident, trust me. Sometimes there's happy accidents. And you turn it into something else. If you have one tree, that's fine. I would say add in another one. It just gives it a bit more of that forest feel, like there's more off to the side. Optional though, if you feel like it's a bit too empty. However, purple leaves can take care of that. This has to dry, so pull out your blow dryer if you have it on the side handy, or at this point you can change your water really quick. We're going to put in more of our snow because when we do a second layer, it's going to bring out some of these snowy bits. You can see it's absorbed a lot of the paint into the canvas. It's still transparent, so you can bring it out a little bit more. And I'm just trying to think what we should do, if we should do the lamppost right now or at the very, I'm going to say the very end. I don't want to mess around with that. Yeah, then just leave it. So change your water. I'm not going to change mine. I'm just going to leave it. But if you are looking to change it, if you need a little stretch, go do that. Then we'll start again with the white, touching it up down here. And this will give it more time to dry, and we can put snow on these trees. We can't do the purple until these trees are done. And you can also touch up on your dark purple if you're wanting to touch up on any dark purple streaks. I could show you a couple little touch-ups for that area. So a little tip, if you're trying to get really thin lines, whatever size 0, if you are trying to work with that, you always have to add water. So when I add water onto my brush and I'm taking some of my paint here, so let's say the teal, you're just going to twirl your brush into it. So you're just kind of mixing it on the side, twirl your brush, and it stays nice and thin on the end. You don't want too much paint onto it. And I like to hold it further back onto the brush. Maybe that's just a me thing, but that's what I like to do. Sometimes you can hold it closer like a pencil, but I like to hold it further back so I have a little bit more of a loose grip, so I can let my wrist just let it flow and kind of do weird dips and curves for the trees. You just very lightly press. You're barely touching the canvas. In the water and paint again, it's a commitment. You can't just use this paint forever. You have to keep applying it because this brush is so thin, it doesn't hold much paint at all. So you do a couple streaks, you add more water and paint to it. So with the touch-ups on the dark purple down here, when you're using this flat brush, you can mix your color again and just make it a little bit different. Either this time, add a bit more red or add a bit more blue. Maybe if you went to red and you want it to be a bit more blue, like the theme of the painting, just add a bit more blue to it. And you can add a touch of black. Okay, so you can add a touch of black to really deepen it if you want to give it more of a extra shadow look. See, I'm just going to enhance that shadow right into the spots that's already shadowed. And you can see that second layer really just makes it darker. You can still see the color. It's not just black. And I'm not going to cover over everything I just made. It's just putting a couple streaks. It gives it multiple layers, especially you can see around the bottom of this tree. Just give it some shadow here. So let's do a bit on the other side. Over on the side here, just a couple streaks again, water, pick up your paint. Lightly flick it off to the side. So that was a little tip on the enhancing the darkness at the bottom over top of the purple you already had here. The other little tip, if you're looking to do this, taking a bit of white here with a smidge of your teal. So it's like you're going back to your light teal color from your background. Something like that. So mostly white and a little scoop of that teal. And you can lighten up. If I just go over some of my little leaves here, just use your finger to kind of blend it out. Get rid of the extra paint so it's not too heavy. It gives it more of a lighter look into the center. Getting the edges, or sorry, off to the side alone, but mostly in the center here. See how it makes it almost look like they're a bit frosty, kind of disappearing. You have to just smooth out some of this paint. You don't want it to be too noticeable, but just a little tip to do if you're trying to lighten up the center a little bit more, give it more brightness. And if if you're having trouble with purple, and at least if you're having trouble with purple, what color is your red and what color is your blue exactly? How are our trees? Are they pretty dry? If they're not fully dry, that's not a huge deal. A little bit damp is okay because it can give it a bit of lighter green sometimes for highlight. It's like a 2-in-1 step. You can give it highlight as well as putting snow on the trees. But just to be safe, let's just wait one more minute by taking white and putting in a little bit more white around this bottom tree that's been bothering me. A nice generous amount. Just kind of pile it in so it's overlapping the tree and no longer the tree is overlapping the snow. Just pull that, just touch up on anything that you need to. More around the middle, I find, is something to really help with the brightness into the middle, especially around here. You can work into some of your purple. If you kind of streak it a little bit into your purple, it breaks up your purple a little bit more. See, when you go inside around and along the edges of some of your darker purple, it really breaks it up and it gets rid of some choppy lines that you're not a big fan of. So right along here, just pull it from the side and just bring it in a little bit, softens that line. Okay, Christmas red and tropical blue. If you're okay, so sometimes your blue and red can be tropical blue sounds like it's a bit teal. It's not going to make a good purple. It's going to make it brown. If that's the problem, it's just you have a color that's making it turn grayish brown. So you really need to either get a pre-mixed violet or you need to get a crimson red, a brighter, something like that's bright red with no orange, no tint of color. And blue needs to be dark. If it is light, if it's a bright blue, it's never going to be dark. It's always going to be light. Okay, so I touched up on the snow and you can see it's a lot more brighter now. You still have some of that teal showing through, but I popped it up on certain spots where it was already white and it just made it more opaque and it's more transparent into the other spots, into the middle. So here's an example of violet that I recommend for pre-mixed color. And here's a red here. This is naphthalene, carmine. That's a good red as well to mix to make blue. It has to be darker color. So the blue has to be a darker blue. It can't be a light blue. Otherwise, you don't get that dark, deep indigo violet look. Okay, yeah, there's so many colors. It's, it's hard to keep track of, but that's why I stick with the basics, because you can mix almost anything with them. Okay, let's put some snow on the trees. Since you made, whatever you made your tree with, the brush, so this brush, this flat one right here, I'm going to stick with it for the layers of the snow on top, may as well. I have a little trick on how to make it look like it's very 3D. It's got a nice wrap around the snow. It's not just flat and one-sided. I'm going to take a good coating of some of my white. So again, I'm just mimicking what I've done before. Light little touches at the top. Leave some gaps. You can already leave some gaps. Let's start towards one side of the tree. So I'm just going to kind of dab and kind of flick it down and out. So I'm just going to flick it down and out a little bit. Don't go too long. Try to keep it shorter overall so it doesn't look like there are these long kind of seaweed and draping branches. They're a bit shorter, so it looks like it has still some gaps, but more layers of snow to sit on top of the branches. So I'm just taking more of the tip of my brush. You can use more of the flat side. Just kind of just pull it down just a smidge and tap at the same time. Change up your style a little bit too, so it's not exactly the same all the way down. Sometimes you're going to go a little bit shorter, so just a couple little taps, and then maybe there's a bit more snow. You can pull it down a little bit more onto a branch that you see here to make it look like there's more snow sitting there. So you're changing up the way that you do this. Another gap. So I'm just following where I think I see a branch, leaving some gaps, not too many gaps, not like a big gap, just a thin gap. Follow that down. And you're going to have to do the middle because the middle is important. I'm just dabbing into the middle here, doing it mostly straight across. A couple little dabs in there. And the other side. So light little touches. You don't have to follow it the same on each side. So on this side, I'm not going to try to just continue it over. I'm just going to let it do its own thing. I'm just going to break it up however I feel like it. So there's some gaps in the middle as well. And you can see multiple layers. Off to the edge here. You go outside your tree a little bit, it looks a little bit wider. And I know some of you are thinking, I don't want to do that, so try not to go wider than your tree. And I'm going to not really play around too much on this area because there's a tree in front of this. So let's do this tree. Light little taps here. Sometimes pull it down just a smidge or just lightly tap. But you can see the lots of the taps are a continuation, and they're kind of connected together to look like a grouping of some snow collected. But I think the most important part here is to not make it look all so uniform, so it's not the exact same amount of snow that you put on each branch and part of the tree. Break it up a little bit, leave gaps on purpose, and it's going to look more authentic and a bit more realistic too. And we can start the purple leaves very shortly. It's going to look really awesome with the purple leaves. I like it. Second coats on your tree, on your green tree, can be done. You can put it with white. You don't have to do every layer of your white touched up with a second coat. If you put more white on some spots than others, it looks like it's more highlighted, whereas some of them are more, you can see a bit more green showing through, or a bit more transparent, and it's not as heavily coated. Just a little bit less snow. And when I do the purple leaves on the sides, I like to go to a larger brush. I like to make it known and make it look like this is more of an impact and it's closer to you. So you're not going to use the same size brush. I'm going to go a bit bigger. You can use a flat or a round. This is a round. I will also show you with a flat brush. I find that a bigger flat brush it does the same thing you did back here, except bigger in the front. So that makes more sense to use the same type of brush. So here's a flat brush that I can show you with this one. And then just, use whatever you find is best. So who's ready to start some of the leaves, the indigo purpley leaves on the sides? Normally, our tutorials, they can range in the amount of time. This one takes a little bit longer because I spent a bit more time on this painting trying to get all these layers in. But yes, you can always come back later, finish it up. Especially when you get to lamppost. You don't want to force yourself to finish this painting just because. You can do the lamppost when it's fully dry and when you're prepared later on too. All right, so starting with the flat brush, we are mixing our indigo color again, or violet, also whatever color that you really, really like. Blue and red about equal parts. Blue is darker than red, so it's going to keep it more violet indigo looking when you take equal parts. It depends on the paint you have. So we can start with something like this, just a nice dark color. Test it out on the side, see how it looks. This is quite dark, yes. Okay, so I'm going to leave that, and I'm going to make one more color here. It's actually just a variation of this color. Just a touch of white so you can see a little bit more of its actual hue show through. And you can see the difference. This one, you can actually see more of the color. This one, it looks black, but it's not black. You'll see. So I have a touch of yellow, or no, I keep saying yellow. A touch of white added to my indigo. Let's add a touch more red for me. I mean, I just a little bit more, and I'm good with that. Give a little bit of white, give it some more brightness. So we're going to switch between these two, but start with this one first. So similar to what I was doing before, starting on the very edge, we want to really get this filled in. I'm going to just kind of press along the side and just space it out a little bit more as it gets towards the middle. It's just less and less towards the middle. So it's coming in from the side here. Just go right over top of your trees. And you can also do things with more purpose. You don't have to just place it in and go, okay, wherever it goes, it goes. You can pretend that there's a branch coming out right here, for example. Just a couple of dabs and trail it away. A very abstract branch. And then now you have a little bit more of an idea on how to fill this in. You're not just filling it in all willy-nilly and whatever happens, happens. Another branch, just a bit more of a gap. So you have just a little bit smaller stuff, and now bring it out a little bit more. It doesn't have to be a perfectly straight line. It can be lopsided, it can hang down a bit more. It's nice to see some drooping, so it looks like the weight of the branch is just kind of curving down. And a little bit more here. So it's the same technique as when we put these teals, just with a bigger brush, bigger flat brush. And then whatever you want to put in between. If you have some emptiness, put some in. Still lots of gaps out here. Okay. So if this brush is doing well, keep with it. I'm going to show you with my round brush because maybe you want to use something and that's all you have, like that's a bit more round. A little bit more of my paint mixed together again. Okay, so since there's no like flat edge, I'm not going to tap with the very tip of it. I'm doing a bit more on the side again, just a smidge of water, and just try to hit more of the side of the brush as you possibly can. I am going to add a couple of these over to the side just so that I have this echoing on the side to this same technique. So you can see I have a lot going onto this corner, filling up a lot of this corner. Starting from the side. Maybe I'll do some branches pulling upwards. Maybe on this side, it's going to change a little bit of the direction. It's going a little bit upwards on an angle. That's what I did in the original, so I'm going to copy it a little bit more like that. Just dab and then just press a little bit lighter, more of the tip to get less and smaller leaves towards the outer edges. And sometimes you have a bit too much emptiness here. You don't want it too symmetrical, right? You want to break it up. So I'm just going to invade a little bit of the space up here with a bit extra leaves. A couple more dabs right into the middle. So right at the top here. A couple more dabs here. And then this one's I'm going to change it to go my branches that are going to just fall down a little bit more over on this side. And I went more heavy-handed on this side and this side. Again, trying to break up the symmetry so it's not exactly the same on each side. So I'm going to follow this down a little bit more. All right. So take a step back and just see if you need to put a little bit more of your leaves in. Sometimes you're a little bit too afraid and you're not really sure. So you can always add in a little bit more. I like this flat brush. This is actually very helpful. But I do put in the blue and red without any white. I like to put in a couple of those dabs with a dip of black. So if you take a dip of black and mix it in, when you start putting this in, you get a bit more shadow, deep shadow, say, for example, along the edges, already on top of branches and leaves that you've already made. When I say branches, I just mean the leaves that you've made into more of branches, more towards the sides here to give it more extra shadow and less into the middle. So you have more along the sides for a deeper shadow. So a couple over here on the side. And I'll just let this sit and dry, I think, for a little bit. So let's start on the lamppost. This painting is a little bit of a challenge. Hopefully you guys are sticking with me here. You just have to trust the process. And if it's has something to do with mixing the paint, you just need to get the same colors I have, you know, phthalo blue, bright red that's not orange, and I'm sure it'll come out much more bright and more purple and indigo-like. Okay, let's start with our lamppost. Let's put it in and make it. It's going to be like a nice dark gray. You can always add black to give it more extra shadow. And when I say dark gray, I mean really dark gray, almost black. I just don't like doing things too black, I guess, to start, because it's not very realistic. It's more supposed to be for a shadow. So with your detailed brush, and whatever detailed brush that may be, it can be your size 0, size 2. You can switch to your size 0 for really tiny, tiny little details. Okay. So grabbing my size 2 to start. I'm just going to show you, actually, I'll show you on this. I'm going to take black here, nice big scoop of that, and a little dip of white. You'll see that it still looks pretty black, but it's actually a super dark gray. There's nothing wrong with just using straight black. All right. So once again, I am twirling with water. So I'm just dipping in the water and just kind of twirling and picking up my paint. You're going to have to keep doing this a lot. That's the thing about painting. Just twirl it, keep it nice and thin on the ends. Hopefully we can still see our outline. And mine is going to end a little bit lower. So I know that I want it to be roughly around here. So I'm just going to follow that outline. It's going to go right over top, wherever it is. It's not going to be working around anything. Right over top, or this tree that's on the side. I'll fill that in a little bit. So honestly, a ruler is just so convenient. So I remembered where the center was here. I'm not going to go into my actual light that I've made. So remember that the lamp that we made at the top? I'm not going to go right through it. I mean, you could, but it's going to be a lot more work to get rid of it. So all I have to do here is just press a little bit harder or just build onto it, make it thicker. It's not going to be a stick. So I want it to be about a good centimeter. Just take your time. I like to do short little strokes as I build onto it. That's just my preference. Okay. So I think that's a good solid line. Water is key. All right, and I'm going to switch now to my more detailed brush to get some finer lines for that lamp at the top. And there's a little circle, a little ball at the top. Filling this little cap at top in. And I'll go a little bit closer, but first I want to fill this in. I'm just using a slightly bigger brush to fill this in. Just up and down strokes. And remember those rings just above this? If you're adding this in, you can put this in now. They're just kind of swoop it across, stacked on top of each other. And they're accented with highlights, so they're going to look a bit more noticeable with the highlights later on. Okay, let's go a little bit closer. Okay, so sometimes you make little boo-boos, and that's what your detailed with light teal is for. It's going to help get rid of some things just by going back over top with a light teal and get rid of it. And it can make lines look a little bit thinner than they really are. Okay, so one thing that I want to do is just around, I just kind of swooped it around just a little bit along this top. So it looks like it's wrapping around towards the back. Just a little line, and bring it across, and I just swooped it around. So it looks like it's just wrapping around that side at the top here. And you can go a little bit thicker so it's a tiny bit more noticeable. And with your number 2, where did I put that? We're going to fill in the lamp with a bright yellow. So you have to take mostly white, just a touch of yellow, so it's very bright and just soft. I'm not trying to go too yellow here. I have a super bright yellow. It's almost white looking. Wipe off some of the paint. That's really key. You just want to wipe off some of the paint. You can actually just use your finger to kind of fill it in a bit. But when you fill it in the center, just be careful. Just lightly fill it in so it fills up most of that area in here. Too much paint, it doesn't look like a soft light. You can use your finger to pull off some of the paint, and there. We're going to keep building onto this now. Going back to my super dark gray or the black. So a little bit of a design. I just did a little line curving out on each side. So just kind of swooping out and down. And into the middle, we have this line going straight up, and it's going to be holding up that light. Hold on, I'm just going to scoop up some of the extra water. So it's a V shape, just a little bit. And in the center, whatever design you want to put in, whatever streaks, you can put, for example, just a couple lines. I just did a curve, like a frown, curve line from each end, from this side to the other side. Gives it more interest. And I'm going to go back into, so at the bottom here, I had this straight line going across here and a little bump at the top. And we're going to try and do a straight line sticking out from the edge on the left side. You could put like a little arrow on the end. Okay, so a little bit of a gap, and then I'm going to do a triangle. So we made this with our outline with pencil, but sometimes you lose it, but you can easily put it back in. So just a line sticking out on each side, about the same amount on each side. These are all going to stand out a lot better when we put highlights. And another one down here. Okay. So just at the top, if you're looking to put a little bit more like me, I put a little, like an extra little cap just coming up on the top. So it's a little bit wider than this one. It's really, oh, see, look at that. It's really hard to see until I put a highlight, but you'll see that scoop just going around the top. So it's like an extra layer. It's okay, I'll wipe that up. That will be fine. Okay, so we have basically the silhouette of it. One thing that I like to add in with my detailed brush was just a little bit of white, and a good little trick too is just taking your finger with a bit of white on the tip of it and just putting a little circle with your fingertip, because you get a perfect circle. And it just looks like a glowing light bulb. Look at that. Or you can use your brush. So let's take just a couple minutes to highlight the various spots on our lamppost, bringing out all the little creases into it, adding in a bit of snow. So if you take some white and just a little bit on the brush with water, you can just get a light highlight right on the side here. Just follow it up carefully. Anything you don't like, just put some dark gray or black over top. It's gone. See how it's on the side, but it's not on the very edge. There's still that very thin black line close to the edge. So it's inside the black, but off to the side. So more water and some more paint. I'm going to now add in little dots of snow into this little triangle piece right here. I'm just going to use my finger to kind of blend it across. give it a bit of a smear. That's a good little trick too for a faded highlight. More dots of snow here. You can go just a little bit more heavy-handed on one side. Just kind of smear that across, make it a bit more faded in towards the other side. Up here as well. So just along the top, and just drag that down. So there's more of like a brighter snow sitting on the top, and it's faded towards the bottom. On this line. If you go on top of your black, it makes your black look a little bit thinner. So you can always drag it a little bit more on top. Someone's asking what I use to wipe up the excess paint. My finger, or you can use your napkin. So if you need to absorb something, use your napkin with a little bit of water, and you can wipe off paint that you accidentally put somewhere, and you don't right away. Don't wait for it to dry. That's not going to work out very well. So right away, no panicking. You can get that off. So I'm going to dab a little bit. Okay, so up here on this cap, you can see I'm just going to highlight a little bit up here. Just along the top. See how I left that black line just along the top of this lamp? I'm just going to lightly tap and gives it more of a rim. And a little bit here too. Same with on the top of this ball. If I just go over some of my white, it can really get rid of some of that white. If you want to make it maybe less snowy towards the middle. But anyways, not too much of like a white outline. Okay, so just a couple little dabs into the middle here. Give it a bit of highlight. And let's see, a little bit down here along these rings. I like to drag this out a little bit more. Okay, so as we're working down here into this area, that is an interesting spot. So trying to make it look a bit more realistic and has those little creases going through it, I like to start with more of just a medium type of gray. So about equal parts of white and black. You don't get too light. You just have a in-between gray. It's still going to be a nice little indent and highlight. So something like this. So what I want to do here is just give it a little line coming down to basically to the bottom. Keep it pretty thin at the top and then make it a little bit wider towards the bottom. leaving that gap on the side. So I'm going to put another gap and just do the same type of thing. Just try to think that you're going with the flow and the curve of this bottom of the lamppost. Water, paint, another gap. Make it wider at the bottom. And really thin at the top. So it's not going to the very top. There's still that black crease going in up here. And I'm going to take plain white. So I washed off that brush, took plain white. This is still the same tiny detailed brush I've been using. And let's give it a little highlight just along the side of each one. And then I just dab in some snow at the top. I'm just going to do some dots of snow. It's going to fill up a lot at the top. And you can use your finger to kind of blend it out, smear it a little bit more. So this bottom part can take some playing around with. You can always fit in a little bit more, like a little extra gray highlight on the sides. Especially if you think it needs it. Okay, so that's a lot of work for the lamppost, but it's pretty much, it's mostly done. Down here, if you need to put more black back in, you certainly can. You can just leave it more plain, if anything. But I think I'm going to leave that. I'm going to let this all dry. We're going to finish up with the purple leaves on the edges. I like to use a bit of highlight, a bit of frosty look with some white. And then we can put the glow around our lamppost. And I'll show you just one more little technique if you want to go above and beyond. If you've been sticking with me and you want to just put in an extra little bit of highlight into your lamp, it's kind of cool. So with the leaves, let's put that highlight I was talking about. I like to use whatever large brush that you've been working with, so round or flat. So I'm just going to use the round for the sake of using it. And I'm going to use the same brush to do the white frost anyway. So I'm going to stick with the same one. Let's go a little bit further back again. Okay. So really quick, this is just a bit of a highlight. We're not going to go too crazy. Some blue again in red, equal parts again. So you're trying to mix the same color you had before with white, bit more white. All you're doing is getting a much brighter, not too bright, not like a super light color, but you're just getting it a few shades lighter than what you have here. It's going to be noticeable, but you can still see it's still a bit dark. And Steve, thanks for watching and joining. So let's test it out. Let's see how it looks. That's a nice highlight. Add a couple dabs in, see if it changes. I'm going to do a little bit more white in here so it gets a bit more noticeable. A couple dabs. More towards the edge and leaving the corners more darker and shadowed. Like a little touch of paint. I think it pops it out really well. Just over top of where you already had your purple. I'm not really trying to add more leaves. I'm just trying to put the layers on top of where I already have my leaves placed. And that will be the same for the white. There. So I have some highlights. Just a softer bit of edges. Yep. Sif is asking why the purple. Because I felt like it. I felt like the purple is great with teal. It's complementary with the teal. I thought it worked really well. Playing around with colors, and it's just kind of makes it a bit more fantasy looking, like the Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe is more of a fantasy. So I thought it was a good fit. So I've washed this off completely, and now I'm going to fray my brush just a little bit. So if you have a crappy brush, and I really mean this, if you have a frayed brush that you don't like, maybe like a hog hair from an oil brush or something that you're just like, ugh, you can use that, or just spread out, see all these little bristles, make it like that. It can be on a flat brush too. Any brush that has this, it can be a fan brush, but I find a fan brush is, I find this does a way better job with the spongy look and the frosted look. So if you take just a very light coating of white onto this brush, but you can't use it like this. You have to just dab it a little bit onto an extra plate or something like that, napkin, so that it sits more into the brush and it's not too heavily coated with paint. You're just going to lightly tap with the tip of your brush on some of the ends of your leaves, and it gives it a snowy, frosted look. Just pull from some of the sides, follow a sort of branch that you think you've made. Grab a bit more, dab it so it sits more into the brush. Keep it frayed. And hopefully you like the frosted look. If you don't like it, just don't add it in. You can see if it's you can see the difference between mine and what it was before, and decide if you want to at all. Yes, thanks for joining. For those who are sticking around for the last couple little bits, so the glow around the lamppost, if you want to put that in, has to fully dry though. So this has to be fully dried, which for me it is. You can come back later and do it yourself. And one little thing too that I found kind of a neat addition to the lamppost with your detailed brush. This is my size 0. You can take any of your teal, or if you want to do purple, I'm just going to do some teal. You can take some of your light teal and you can add this as an extra little addition to your highlight in parts of your lamp. So it's not a pure white highlight. You can see that it just gives it a little smidge of color and more of a essence and reflection of everything around it onto your lamppost. So maybe a little bit into here too. You can put a couple streaks in here. So it's got some of this color going throughout. You can just add this in anywhere you want to. And the snow at the bottom here, I'm going to use a slightly bigger, I'm going to use my flat brush again. I feel like it's just been doing a really good job. We're going to take that same bright yellow that we've mixed before. Almost, again, looks pretty white, but it's just a soft yellow. Into the snow. Just kind of swipe it across short little lines. You can go around a little bit of your purple, give it, again, break up some of the purple, little hint of that color here. Not going too much with it as I go crazy, but that's good. That's a good amount. Wash this off. And let's finish up the glow around this lamppost. In terms of the brush, I like to use my number 2. Number 2 detailed. So I'm using that same bright yellow that I did down here. A little bit of water and not too much paint. So if I take a little scoop of this color and I just take water and I kind of water it down. Remember, this has to be fully dry, otherwise it's not going to work out too well. A little bit of water, just water it down, lightly coated, keep it transparent. You can test it out from the inside and just make a circle. You can just kind of circle around and it gives it a glow. You can use your finger to spread it out if it's too much. But as long as it's a bit more watery, it's transparent, it's not going to really cover your background. It's just going to have a nice glow of light. Kind of makes you feel a bit more safer just putting this in. I feel like it's just so much of a cozy, warm feeling. Just around the bottom too, and go as much out as you really want to. You can drag it a bit more towards the sides. There. So we have on our Facebook page, we have a spot where people can show their results. This was more of a challenge, a lot more work, more layers and everything like that. But hopefully you guys liked it, you enjoyed it, and if you're painting later, great. Just stick with it, trust the process. You can post on our Facebook page, Artist Palette Durham region, under our calendar there. It's pinned to the top of the page. You can see what else is coming up. We have lots of events coming up. I'm doing, for Valentine's Day, I'm doing a really detailed rose. So another bit of a challenge with acrylics. And we have more fun surprises for other events that are coming up. So you can sign your painting, the bottom with maybe a dark purple or black. And maybe you'll paint again with me next time. You can check out on artistpalettedurham.com what we have on our website too, if you really like painting with us. And thanks, Sylvana. Yep. Yeah, so thanks for joining me, guys. Have a great rest of your night or day. And hopefully I see you guys paint with me again. Help support us. Bye, everyone.